Welcome to Knock Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live from Kingsland, Texas, USA, with another episode of Controversial Issues. With that controversial Rabbi Chaim Checkmate Coffman, he's back in black. And here we go. What we're going to do is we're going to make this as controversial as possible today, just because it's something that's we've talked about this before, but we're going to cover one more aspect today that we didn't cover last time. So men versus women in the Bible, or women versus men, however that sounds better to your ear. And so in the past, we talked about modesty. We talked about teaching authority, things like that. And we're going to recover a lot more of that again today. But one thing we're going to mention, discuss also, is why was it that men were permitted to, and this isn't the key topic, this is just going to be discussed along the way. Why was it that women were only allowed to be married to one man, but men could have multiple wives or concubines? And so we're going to kind of hit that while we're here as well. So welcome back, Rabbi. Hope you've had a great week. And
always a pleasure. You thought the whole week for this, back in black? That was pretty good. That was
that was on the fly. Technically, that would be me. I'm wearing all black for the most part.
With all the craziness, you still have enough time to think about, things that rhyme. We're gonna chime with rhyme, and and all that. So that's that's good. We need a little bit of humor to get through this it's crazy.
Sure.
Yeah, crazy few weeks, or however long things are going to go.
Right. Very good. Okay, so if you want to go ahead and kick this thing off, we'll get this baby rolling.
All right, sounds good. So, topic, is the topic we have spoken about, but it does come up, quite a bit. And the reason, this idea of men and women, certainly come up is because obviously we're living in the 20th century, 21st century. Right, women. You have women CEOs. You have women doing, similar things. Certainly as men. So people say so within Judaism should be the same, right? Women should have the same role. See, when we pray in the morning, what does a man say? He'll say, "Thank God I'm not a slave." A woman will say the same thing, and a man will also say, "Thank God I'm not a woman." Well, the woman's not going to say that. Right? She'll say, "Thank God I'm created in God's image." So why would we make it negative? Why would we say something negative against women? Obviously, when it comes to women, women saved the Jewish people certainly from they didn't worship the golden calf. They, the righteous women saved us from Egypt, right? We got redeemed through them. So obviously, it cannot be as people think. It's unbelievably, discriminatory, right? There are differences. We'll see. We'll speak about some of them, right? But in general, when we look at this whole idea, a person has to remember, you cannot look at it, from our own perspective, right? One of the things that we have to try and do on a regular basis, and that is to look to the Torah. What does the Torah say? Right? What's going on? What's behind what the Torah says? What's the purpose of what I'm doing? Now, a lot of it you may say, well, it doesn't make sense, right? You have, let's say, 80%, of the Torah may not make necessarily logical sense. To us, it doesn't matter. We believe it's a God-given book. If it's a God-given book, doesn't matter. We have to keep it, right? But at the same time, we cannot, and it's absolutely forbidden, to look at the Torah from our own perspective, right? In other words, doesn't mean we don't have to try and understand it, but trying to put a 21st century spin, on what's going on, right? That's going to be kind of horrific. That's going to be, essentially, it's going to be heretical. We use a case in point. We'll look at, the chief rabbi of England, who, a few months ago made a statement, pretty radical statement, and that is that you look at King David, you look at the patriarchs, you look at Yaakov, etc. And what did he say? He said, well, a lot of the trials they went through, they went through all these difficult things, so it must be they had some level of depression. Now, if we look at it from a 21st century perspective, what do we see? They have difficulties, right? No question. You look what Yaakov goes through, right? He's got to fight his brother. He has to deal with Yosef. He's got to deal with his daughter. He's got to deal with Lavan, right? And, spending 14 years just to get his wives, all these different things. He had a difficult time, right? There's no question. The only thing is, who are we to say who these people are, right? We have no idea. We wouldn't even be the crust, the crust in their toenails, right? The dust underneath their fingers. We have no idea who these people are. I understand why someone would do that, right? Try and put it in a perspective that, we could understand it in a 21st century, lingo or whatever you want to call it. But at the end of the day, you're talking about some of the greatest people created in the history of man, right? We have no idea, right? We have no idea how great they are. You take Moshe Rabbeinu, right? Some people, God forbid, right, even call themselves Orthodox. We mentioned this once, a few times before. Someone said, oh, he's a bad leader. Moshe Rabbeinu, 48th level of understanding. Nobody had that in the world, except for him. There are 49 levels of understanding. So how can we put our own ideas? We have to try and understand, what the Torah says. We have to put it in our lives. We have to live it. But we cannot say, oh, I live in 21st century, so obviously men and women, they're going to be the same, right? They're going to have the same role, right? So I know, a great rabbi told a story, and it was, speaking about this, this topic, to, a bunch of feminists, right? A bunch of big-time feminists. And he said, okay, he started off by saying, are there any differences between men and women, right? So these big-time feminists say, no. So he goes, okay, let me ask the question again. Are there any differences? Anything you can think of, any difference between men and women? Oh, well, I got one difference. Women give birth. Men can't, right? If men had to give birth, probably wouldn't be so many children in the world, right? So women give birth. That's a difference, isn't it? If there are physical differences, right? Biology 101A, we'll keep this clean, right? We'll keep it PG-13 because we want the ratings to go up. So the idea is if they're different physically, well, we could say possibly they're different spiritually. Now, this has nothing to do with brain capacity, right? This has nothing to do with saying, oh, they could never do what we do. They couldn't pray 3 times a day. They couldn't learn like we do. They couldn't do all these other things that we do that they're exempt from, right? Because Talmud tells us they're exempt from mitzvahs that are bound by time. Why? Because they have other responsibility. What's the other responsibility normally? Right? All things being equal, they have kids, they have to, they're going to deal with the kids. Obviously, they are more nurturing than men. Now, can you train a man to be more nurturing? In theory, right? In theory, you could, but he's never going to be as nurturing, as a woman. So there are certain fundamental things. Now, again, people jump up and down. That's why we do this show, right? The people say, come on, that's sexist. That's putting them back in the dark age. What? They're only around supposed to have children? No, obviously they have more of a role than that, right? Oh, so why would it have to have the children? Well, men can't, right? That's obvious. So if it's a choice of who's going to go to work, whether it's the man or the woman, right? All things being equal, if he can make enough money, he's going to go to work. She's going to stay with the kids, right? She is much better equipped. Now, comes along the Torah. What does the Torah tell me in the book of Genesis? The Torah says when woman is created, she's created as a helpmate. Now, a helpmate does not mean a yes person, right? There's a major difference. A yes person, whatever you say, they say yes, right? That's what it means. A helpmate does not necessarily mean they're always saying yes, right? They're always giving in. That's not what her role is, right? Her role is to help her husband reach his potential. She also has her potential, right? So the question is, okay, so if she has other obligations, right? If she has other obligations, good. Then she has what she needs to do. Now, someone's going to say, okay, let's say kids are grown up. There's no little kids to watch or whatever. Is she allowed to do these other things, right? Is she allowed to learn? She's allowed to learn, right? 100%. So we're going to qualify that. She's allowed to teach, right? Some people may be shocked at how is a woman allowed to teach, right? Someone pointed out earlier, of course, right? Isn't that what they're doing, when they're raising kids? That's what they do, right? They're teaching their kids, right? They should be naturally born teachers, some better, some not, whatever the case is. But in general, in general, a woman has the ability to teach. So obviously we see in girls' schools throughout the world, right? America, Israel, other places, you have women that teach women, right? You have women that teach, right? Why shouldn't women be allowed to teach? As long as they have the requisite knowledge, right? And as long as, they can, control a classroom and whatever, they'll have to learn that as well. So they are going to teach, but it's certainly better. I don't think there's any question. It's certainly better for women to be teaching women. Now, the question will be, can a woman teach a man? Or can a man teach women? Right? Women, right? So the question, so women teaching men, is a little more of an issue, right? It's more of a modesty issue. So many, many years ago, there was a woman expert in Bible study. In a modern Orthodox yeshiva, this woman taught behind the mechitza, behind the separation, right? So the men, the men couldn't see her, etc. But she taught men. Now, obviously, that's really not the norm, right? Even if you can't see her, why not? Because again, there are laws of modesty, right? Even if you can't see her, that's the whole question. Can a man listen to a woman sing? Right now, there are, why is that an issue? Because the Talmud says a woman's voice is licentious. Now, obviously, it depends how she sings and how good she sings, but it doesn't really matter, right? That's pretty much what the Talmud says. So how do we understand? So is it forbidden for a man, what if she's not live, right? What if it's just a video, right? Could he watch the video? Could he, let's say it's an audio and he cannot, he doesn't know what she looks like, right? There are some leniencies that, some rabbinical authorities say, well, if you can't see her and, you wouldn't recognize her on the street, right? There are some leniencies. The vast majority of rabbinical authorities do not hold of them. But in general, I'm just pointing out that even if you can't see her, even if you wouldn't recognize her on the street, right? Sinead kind of shaved her head, right? I'm dating myself here. She totally shaved her head, so you wouldn't recognize her anyway, right? Old Baldy, right? How are you going to recognize her? You're not going to recognize her. So even if you don't recognize her, that doesn't really matter, right? Because again, we still hold that a woman's voice is licentious, whether it's live, whether it's not live, you recognize, you don't recognize her, etc. Now, that being said, so if you have a woman that has this knowledge, right? She has unbelievable, let's say, this woman has encyclopedic knowledge, of the Torah and the commentaries. So this was a radical thing, that was done. It's not done in just about anywhere else, right? It was done. I don't know how long that, that happened, but she was giving classes to men, standing behind a mechitza. Now you're going to say, okay, they can't see her, right? They certainly can't see her. They want to ask questions. I guess they could ask questions, right? It's not going to be just a full lecture, right? But even so, there's another issue, and that is, it's kind of like what we'll say I forget what you call it in English, that it's something that's, not written, let's say, according to Jewish law, but it's like the fifth leg of it, right? In other words, there are four chilkei Shulchan Aruch, the four parts of the code of Jewish law. So this is a fifth, right? A fifth being that, okay, technically speaking, does it say anywhere that a woman can't teach a man? Doesn't necessarily say that, right? It's not brought down according to Jewish law, but there are, there are modesty issues. So, maybe you say it's a moral imperative. You don't want anything else to happen. You can say, what? They're all men there. What's the big deal? In any case, it's not done, right? We try and nip in the bud as much as we can, not to have so much interaction between men and women, right? In a prayer service, right? A person goes to synagogue. There's going to be a separation of men and women. Why? We learn it out from the Beis Hamikdash, right? In the temple, the men were down below, the women were up top. Now, what's the whole purpose? The whole purpose is when a person comes to pray, they're not looking, at their spouse. They're not looking at someone who's not their spouse. They shouldn't be looking anywhere. They should be looking in the prayer book. They should be concentrating on prayer. It definitely has been proven. I don't think there's any shadow of a doubt that if boys and girls learn together, mixed, let's say in a public school, that they don't do as well scholastically as if they were separate, right? I think that's easily proven because there's distraction, right? There's always going to be distraction. But if you're going to synagogue, and the whole point of synagogue is to draw close to God, it's called a mikdash ma'at, a small temple, so to speak, small base on mikdash, right? So we don't have a temple today. We don't see God's presence today, right? We don't, etc. So therefore, all we have are synagogues, right? That's where God's presence is today. We don't. Again, it's hidden, but again, the holiness, of the place we understand. So if that's the case, why in the world would a person go to synagogue? It's going to be mixed seating. They said, come on, the temple has been destroyed. This is medieval. But isn't the point of being in synagogue to concentrate on what you're doing? The purpose is to concentrate on your connection to God. That is the purpose. If that essentially is the purpose, why am I looking at women? I mean, not me. Why are you looking at women, right? Or vice versa. I was in a synagogue once for something, and synagogue had a mechitza, right? It was a big enough mechitza. It fit all the criteria. There was only one issue, right? What was the one issue? The one issue was it's made out of plexiglass. Now, it wasn't like smoking glass where, you couldn't see in and they couldn't see out. It was plexiglass, right? So, I felt like I was at a hockey rink. I wanted to deck someone in the boards. It was ironic, right? In other words, someone's going to ask, well, doesn't that fulfill the requirement? Doesn't that separate between men and women? Isn't that the whole purpose? Yeah, that is the whole purpose, except you're not supposed to be able to see the women. If you tell me it's slat wood, it's all crisscrossed, you can't see anything, okay. If you tell me there's a wall there and there's a little bit of an opening so they can hear, okay. But if you tell me it's plexiglass, even though it's 5 feet, 6 feet, or, 1.5 meters tall, whatever you want to say, whatever denomination, that's true. But the fact that you can see inside, they can see you and you can see them, that defeats the purpose, right? Again, does it follow the requirement of a mechitza? It separates, good, right? But there's a reason for separation. The reason for separation is to make sure a person concentrates on what they're doing. This goes for women as well. It's not just for men. Oh, only the men are looking. I don't think so, right? You might say men look more. Good, right? But women are also not allowed to look. When the Torah tells me, the third paragraph of the Shema, you're not allowed to go after your eyes. You're not allowed to go after your heart. Who's that? Who's being talked to over here? Is it just men? Is it men and women? Says the Rambam, clear. It's talking about everybody, right? Women also have an inclination, right? They also have their evil inclination. They also have a heart. They could, God forbid, go astray, etc. Also have to be careful what they see, right? No question. It's not just for men. You can say, but men are different, and this doesn't matter, right? There's still the same obligation. So we understand. People might think, it's a crazy thing. Why do they have to be separated? Why go that far? So even if you tell me scholastically they're going to do much better if they're separate, good, right? But you're going to say, what? You're going to, how could you make them separate for so long? It's better in the long run, right? For relationships, it's better. Go back, I'll age myself here. Go back and watch When Harry Met Sally. Right? You cannot have a friend of the opposite sex. That just gets in the way. Physicality gets in the way. Now, when you look at this issue, right, we're going to hit a whole bunch of different things. Hopefully, hit enough. Otherwise, you'll give me another couple hours or we'll finish it, in the next coming weeks. One idea is the fact that, we're physically different, we're spiritually different. We have different obligations. Having different obligations does not say I'm better than, someone else. Someone, I sort of got hammered on this a few weeks back, and someone said, so you think because, let's say someone's a product of an intermarriage, and through the product of that intermarriage, the wrong spouse is Jewish, i.e. the father, right? So the father's Jewish, the kid isn't Jewish, go after the mother. So if you go after the mother, you say, well, this kid isn't Jewish, even if he's related to you by blood. Okay, so you say, so you think you're better. right? This is where the conversation went. It says, oh, you think you're better. It's not a question of being better, right? The Torah tells me I have obligations. The Torah tells me there's a right way to do things, there's a wrong way to do things. And either you believe that the Torah is true, which we've spoken about a number of times, or you don't. And if you don't believe it's true, it's fantasy. Well, the person didn't want to hear it's fantasy. So what? What people do with fantasy? There are other denominations. Why do you think you're right? Okay, we spoke about that, right? But the idea is people look at it as, oh, you're being square. You're going back to Victorian England. You're going back to these antiquated laws, right? Now let's understand. The first quote unquote religion. We don't necessarily look at Judaism as a religion, right? It's certainly a way of life, much more than a religion, right? But the first quote unquote religion, in the world that protected women's rights were us. How do I know? Very simple. Let's go to the marriage document. What does the marriage document say? Marriage document says a husband's obligated. He's obligated to give his wife certain things. He's got to give her clothing. He's got to give her a place to live. He's got to give her food. He's got to give her conjugal rights. She has rights, right? 100% she has rights. God forbid they get divorced. Someone says, oh, people in your community don't get divorced. What are you talking about? It's on the books, right? The Torah states clear, the book of Deuteronomy. If you don't get along and, you can't get help and it's over, okay, you get divorced. God doesn't want it, right? You should try and work it out. If you can't work it out, okay, there is divorce. Divorce does exist. It's not an insignificant, number in the Jewish community. I don't think it's 10%. I think it's definitely less than that. But compared to the secular world, marriage doesn't make sense. 60% or more of marriages end up in divorce, right? If you end up living together, it's even higher, like 70% or more. So I heard Victor Miller, of blessed memory, one of the Torah giants of the last generation. What did he say about this? He said, what's a great way to ruin a great romance? So what's the way to ruin a great romance? Get married, right? So here a person's living together. All of a sudden, now they get married. They have a piece of paper. Piece of paper now is legal. Not the same, right? It's not as enjoyable. But it doesn't really make that much sense logically. If you say, listen, they've been living together for years, 10 years, 15 years. They finally decide, okay, we're going to get married. Right? Forget about common law marriage. They say we're going to get married, we're going to do it legally. Fine. So they end up doing that. Why do so many end up in divorce? Right? If they've already used to each other, and everything else, unless there was, other issues, right? That should not happen. Right? If you tell me, most people get divorced after the first year, maybe after the second year, right? The institution of marriage doesn't work today. Why? Because the vast majority are getting divorced. It's better not to get married, I would say. Forget about halacha. I'm not talking about Jewish law, but the institution itself, problematic, right? It doesn't necessarily work. So someone said, oh, even in your community, it's growing. Yeah, but we're not even 10%, right? I don't even think we're at 10%. So even that, if we're not 10% is still bad. I'm not saying not close to 60%. That's 6 times greater. So they're, oh, but you don't believe in divorce. Not true, right? People want to get divorced. They'll end up getting divorced, right? We're not saying it's a good thing. We do whatever we can to save a marriage, but if it can't be saved, okay, right? But the point I wanted to make is that the marriage document protects the woman. Why does it protect the woman? Because the guy has to pay, right? He has to take care of her. He's got obligations. That's the first document in history, that protected women's rights. So now someone's going to say, oh, but isn't it true if the husband dies, she doesn't inherit, it really goes to her son and whatever. Yeah, why is that? Because she gets covered by the ksuva. She gets covered by the marriage document. She doesn't need to inherit, right? She'll be covered because the marriage document covers, right? The marriage document has weight, right? The first one in history that protected women. So people are going to say, oh, women this, women that. So what about protection over here, right? What about the fact that husband's got all these obligations, right? What about the fact, so we'll get into a little bit about polygamy. We'll get there in a second, or in a little bit, depends how I get to it. right? But the idea is someone would mention, there are a lot of women that are chained women. What do chained women mean? It means that if a husband gets divorced and he doesn't give her a bill of divorce, what we call a get, he doesn't give her a bill of divorce, then she can't get married. So there are recalcitrant husbands that do all kinds of things. They'll demand a lot of money, extortion, other things, and they'll just cut the nose to spite their face. Say, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to do it, but you can't force him, right? Because the Talmud says if you force him, he's doing it under duress. If he's doing it under duress, it's no good, right? In other words, you're forcing him into something where if he doesn't give it of his own free will, right, then that's considered like a forced bill of divorce. And that, obviously, we don't allow. Now, it comes on the Rambam. The Rambam, interestingly, says, I can beat him to an inch of his life. I can beat him to an inch of his life to give a bill of divorce. Hey, what about how can he go against the Talmud? The Talmud says you're not allowed to do that, right? That's a forced bill of divorce. Can't do that, right? So says the Rambam, no, it's not a problem. Why not? Because the husband really wants to do the right thing. The only thing is evil inclination takes over. So since his evil inclination takes over, you're allowed to do that. We don't go like the Rambam. It's a lot more complicated, right? But in general, you could ask, why should this be? Why in the world should this be? Why, let's bring back this idea of a prenuptial agreement, right? So in the modern Orthodox community, they've been doing this for 30 years. Writing a prenuptial agreement could be, sooner or later in the ultra-Orthodox community, worded probably a little bit different, but it could be, it's going to come up as well. But they had problems with the wording and different things. But what's the issue? Why should it be that a woman gets stuck and a man can do what he wants? Right? So you have to understand, when a man and a woman get married, you have the souls are two halves. Right? We're always, the man is looking for his other half. Right? Technically, I would say maybe, a woman doesn't have to get married. Right? The other man and not on the woman. She herself obviously has to help in the process. So really the obligation is on him. Now, when it comes to commitment, right? And this is really the crux of the issue. When it comes to commitment, who is it harder to commit, a man or a woman? Well, the Talmud says clear, a woman would rather be married than not be married. Now, that doesn't mean she's going to marry anybody, right? But she feels safer. And again, we'll speak about polygamy and how this fits in, right? But she'll feel safer being married to someone, even if there are, other women married to him, for a number of reasons, rather than be alone. So anyone who's ever seen a Jewish wedding, what are they going to see? They're going to see under the canopy, the man's going to give a ring. Right? He's going to say, you are sanctified to me according to the law of Moshe and the Jewish people. Now, you can say, why do we discriminate against women? Why can't a woman give the ring? Why does it have to be a man? Right? Because the answer is, who is it harder to make the commitment in general? Now, I'm a guy, right? I'm not a woman. I didn't play one on TV either, right? So therefore, it's harder for a man to commit than a woman. He can play the field, have a great time. Well, what does he want a commitment for? What does he want a ball and a chain? No pun intended. What does he want that for? He doesn't want that. He wants to, enjoy himself eventually. Grow up, he'll settle down. Whatever. Much easier for a woman to commit. Certainly for a woman to commit than a man. Right? That's obvious. So you're going to say, okay, so change it, right? How can we change it? It's harder for him. If it's harder for him, so he has to be the one to break it. In other words, he's the one that takes it. He's the one, quote unquote, makes an acquisition. He gives her something, right? He gives her something of value. Now, it's not really like, a question of what the acquisition really is. But it's not, right? He's giving something over. He's giving something over. Right? So therefore, when it comes commitment, it has to come from him. So therefore, if he makes the commitment, he also has to break it. Now, someone is going to say, but that's not fair. Why should he have the right to hold this woman up? And it's wrong. Everyone will tell you it's wrong. And they, today they'll do all kinds of things to try and get the husband, to give a bill of divorce. They can't force him, right? They absolutely can't force him. And this could go on for a very long time. Now, there's a story my Rebbe told me, a horrific story. I mean, I'll just mention this in passing, but it's a horrific story. There was someone who got divorced, and this person had a daughter. And what he said was, he already killed his daughter in front of to some guy. In other words, he sort of passed her over, even though it didn't physically, right? But he made a commitment she's going to marry X, right? Now, according to Jewish law, unless he tells who the witnesses are and you get around it, then this person, this person is stuck. Why? Because if he made this sort of this agreement with somebody, right? He made it with somebody who doesn't tell him. He doesn't say who the person is. Why can't she get married? Because she's already promised somebody, who it could be your brother, it could be your relative, it could be anybody, right? This guy refused to give his wife a bill of divorce. Since he refused to give her a bill of divorce, he got angry, right? Which is understandable, right? Depending on the circumstances. Got really angry, and he said, you know what? I'm going to mess up my daughter for life. And therefore, that's what he did. And so this woman comes to my Rebbe in tears and says, what do I do? And my Rebbe said, unless we find out, who this person is, or he said it over to somebody in front of witnesses, got to find the witnesses, right? To who he said it. And otherwise, if you don't find out, you can never get married. Now, that's a horrific thing for a father to do. So you're going to say, well, change it. Make a loophole. Make some sort of loophole. If a person does this, then these are the repercussions. Now, there are other provisions for certain things that we may be able to, get around. Something like this, is a lot more difficult. A lot more difficult. It's impossible to get around. Right? So now, can a person abuse the system? A person 100% can abuse the system. Is that what happens in most cases? No. That's not what happens. But even if it's something that's, that doesn't happen, in order to overturn it, you have to understand another thing. The other thing is you need a greater rabbinical court, a greater Beis Din in order to overturn it. Greater Beis Din in number and a greater Beis Din in knowledge. Well, we don't have that today. Nobody has that today or in previous generations. Why not? Because the Beis Dins in previous generations much greater than today. The rabbis of previous generations knew a heck of a lot more than we do. Right? That there's nothing to talk about. So there's no way to overturn it. So you're going to say, okay, this woman, it's not her fault. It's not her fault that her father's an idiot. And this is what the father did. You're right. 100%. But that doesn't change anything. The fact that she's stuck now again, people jump up and down and say, what, a woman can't get remarried? What, and civilly she can get divorced. That's not an issue, right? We're talking about according to Jewish law. According to Jewish law, there's a problem, right? I would tell any woman that, any Jewish woman that, if the husband's gonna make all kinds of issues, if they're gonna get divorced, give in as much as you can, get that bill of divorce and get out, even if you lose, right? The reason is because he can hold you hostage, right? And obviously there's no permissibility for that, but people do things they shouldn't do, right? Don't mix up Jews and Judaism. Just because someone does it, and this father, what he did to his daughter is horrific. So I told my Rebbe, I said, hang him over a cliff. I said, hang him over a cliff, beat him to an inch of his life. He said, we can't. I said, why not? He said, because if we do that, he may lie. Right? How do we know he's telling the truth? We can't know for sure. right? So you cannot take a system that's worked for the most part. You got a few idiots that, okay, try and mess things up. But if it works 98% of the time, okay. You're not going to sit there and say, wow, see, it doesn't work. Turn out now, see, the Torah is this, the Talmud's that, it doesn't work, blah, blah. It's not true, right? They're just taking one thing out of context. Can it be abused? It can be abused, right? It doesn't mean that there's a problem with the system. It means there's a problem with us, that there's a problem with people that do such a thing. And, you got to be pretty cruel, or pretty darn ticked off to do that to your daughter. I mean, there's obviously a way around it. And that is he tells who it is and he allows her to get married, right? At least, find someone to get married. Anything happens to this guy and he never tells and he dies, she's chained for life. She's totally chained. That doesn't change. And that's totally horrific. And it should never happen. Should absolutely never happen. So in this case, when it comes to marriage, the man has to make it, the man has to break it. Now it makes sense logically, right? Because it's harder for us to commit. But even if you're going to tell me, well, a woman can be chained, whatever, it's okay. Now, could be in the ultra-Orthodox community, now they're working on this idea of a prenuptial agreement. So therefore, prenuptial agreement is going to say that if you get married, God forbid there's a divorce, you're going to go to this, this rabbi, this based in, and you're going to abide. It's a binding document, right? So again, it's a question of language and how they're going to do it. And eventually, it probably should happen. So now it's okay. So that's about marriage. So now we'll get into your question, because now you're going to get me in trouble here, right? And the question is, what's the deal? What's the deal with a woman? Many women, that married to one man, right? Polygamy. Now, polygamy, even though there was a decree by Rabbeinu Gershom. He made a decree that ended about, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, something like that you're only allowed to marry one, a man's only allowed to marry one woman. So the question is, why was polygamy, that's the first question. Why is polygamy allowed, right? Why would it be allowed? You see by the patriarchs, right? They're allowed to have another wife, right? But there was a difference between a concubine and a wife. A wife was protected, right? A wife was protected by a ksuva, by a marriage document. A concubine was not. So, but you had, Avram had, to have children. Yaakov had, etc. So you see that polygamy seems to be all right. So now the question is, why should that be? Why should a person be allowed to marry so many women? Talmud tells us interesting story that Rabbi Tarfon married 300 women. You're gonna say 300 women? Well, it's quite a bit of, there's a lot of women. King Solomon married a lot of women for different reasons, right? So, let's go back to Rabbi Tarfon. Why did he marry so many women? Because in his time, there was a famine, right? There was a famine. Rabbi Tarfon had plenty of food. Rabbi Tarfon was a Kohen, right? So we got all the priestly tithes. So he had plenty of food, right? So a wife of a Kohen is permitted to eat from these tithes. So these 300 women were whistling Dixie. I don't know if they knew how to whistle Dixie back then, but they are whistling Dixie over there. Why? Because they're being supported, right? You're talking about a time where there's no food, right? So, that would be the case. In a case, let's say, of an agrarian society, right? You take the Torah, it's all about laws about the land, right? Laws about the land of Israel. Laws about land in general. They lived in an agrarian society. Now, in an agrarian society, you have to keep in mind as well that the population was decimated, right? There's wars, people die, etc. So how are women going to survive? It's not like they're just going to go out and get jobs, right? If you're living in an agrarian society, agrarian, however you say it. You're living in an agrarian society. If you're living in an agrarian society, you don't have so many options, right? If your husband dies. So how are they going to survive? How is the population going to replenish itself without the mechanism of polygamy? A man also, what if he's married to a barren woman, right? He's married to a barren woman. So how are they going to have any kids to help, right? She can't have kids, right? Or whatever the case is. So how's he going to be able to defend his house, defend his property? He doesn't have kids. So, he would, he could marry a barren woman if he, even if he's married to someone else, right? He's got other people to help, right? To help in the field, to help in the house, to help survive, etc. Now, if the world at that time would have been exclusively monogamous, i.e., you're only allowed to marry one person, right? Now his wife might be insecure, right? In other words, it's only her and him. God forbid anything happens to her husband. What's going to be, right? What's going to be? She has kids, she doesn't have kids, etc. So in any event, it was permitted under, seemingly under certain circumstances. It wasn't successful. If we look at history in general, a man married to more than one woman did not buy, didn't seem like it was so successful, right? You certainly see by Yaakov that, there was friction. There was friction between Rachel and Leah. Leah had kids, Rachel didn't, right? And Leah felt jilted because, Rachel was supposed to be married first, and really Yaakov loved her more, right? The whole question exactly, what that means. Doesn't mean he hated her, right? No doubt. But, okay, she felt in some way, she felt jilted, even though she had more kids, etc. But she felt jilted. So you see, there are a number of cases where you have a man married to many women, and the end result is not good. So you have to understand as well why would it be a bad thing? Because every extra wife, no matter how lowly her status, he's got to provide for her, right? He's got to provide food. He's got to provide clothing. He's got to give her conjugal rights, according to her need. I mean, guy, he's working in the field. He's working, etc. Back-breaking labor. The guy's tired. And the second wife, third wife's like, it's my time. And this guy, it's only so much to go around. As that they say, it totally weakens a person, right? There's no question. So the question is, how is he going to be able to meet each person's needs for what they need? Not only that, but if God forbid there's divorce, got to take care of them also. So came along Rabbeinu Gershom, and he made a decree. He made a ban on polygamy. Right? That was dependent on the conditions of the time, but he left the door open. He made it for, I forget how long it was, but it was, like I said, it was recently up, and we've held on to this ban, right? You don't see too many people, certainly not in the Ashkenazi world, for sure not. Maybe in certain groups you see someone have, another wife, but in general, it's not the case. And, it seems we almost across the board, people only have one wife. So, where did it come in? Where could it come in? Let's say a wife's become mentally incapacitated, right? Something happens and she can't take a bill of divorce. Why not? Because she's not all there. And even if you give it to her, right, you have to give it to her. You have to give this bill of divorce. She doesn't know what it is, right? She doesn't have any dash. She doesn't have any understanding of what it is because, mentally she's not there. So it could be, maybe there are certain instances where he would be allowed even possibly today to marry someone else, even though his wife, is still alive and is not divorced. But again, that's that might be rare, but the question's going to be, is he allowed to? Right? Technically maybe he's allowed to. Right? Maybe it's not an issue because, well, it's not really there anyway. So why should we chain the husband? This could go on for years. What if she gets, God forbid, she gets Alzheimer's at a very young age? She could live another 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, whatever it is. And then the husband's stuck, right? But okay, when he got married, he understood this, this could happen. So you say, okay, this is your lot in life. This is what you have to deal with, and that's it. So I'm not sure so many rabbinical authorities, it wouldn't be, for me to decide, but I'm not so sure, so many rabbinical authorities are going to say in such a case that even though she's incapacitated, you're allowed to get divorced. I mean, I've heard in the secular world, that happening, and that, and when you think about it, what does the husband do? Okay, his wife's incapacitated. Okay, why should I suffer? So what does he do? He drops like a hot potato, and whoever's going to take care of her takes care of her. And that's it's a little bit selfish, right? Because even in the vows, even in even the secular world, till death do you part. It's not it's like, well, if you're incapacitated, see ya. It's been great, but I'm out of here. I'm not gonna stay chained for for 20 years or more. And secular world's a lot easier. In that, I'm not saying it's not cruel. I think it's definitely cruel. I don't think there's any question, right? But certainly in our world, in the Torah world, you shouldn't be allowed to do that. You're there for better, for worse. And I know my Rebbe's wife that when I first knew him more than 20 years ago, talking now 24 years, almost 25 years. So when I first met him, his wife, I met his wife, and his wife had Alzheimer's. So she was really at the beginning, so to speak, but she got it very young. She got it relatively young, in her early 60s. So, and how long did she have it before she passed away? I think about 13 years. I think 13 years, 14 years, and she died suddenly. Just her heart gave out, right? But it wasn't, I don't know if it's because of Alzheimer's or not or whatever, but, she wasn't that old, and once told me when I was taken into the Beis Din that, went to say goodbye to his wife, and she's being taken care of by a Filipino, and while she was, she's eating lunch, and he, went to her, and he looked at her, and he's like, Mommy, it's me. She looked at him 1 split second, she recognized him, and that was it. She couldn't speak, right? She didn't have the ability to speak, when she got it, and even she did speak, no one, really understood what she said, but, afterwards, he told me, and, as we were walking out the door, he said that, this is one of my trials. God wants me to work on this, that, and the other thing, and, let's go. And I was shaking. Here's someone married 40 years, 45 years, sees his wife, brain is like Swiss cheese, etc. And, she can't do anything for herself. She has to be taken care of, and, and all that. Terrific. No one wants to see that, from a spouse, someone, he grew with, he had kids with, all these different things. He didn't leave her, right? It wasn't even an option. Would have been an option in his mind. That okay, this is a trial. This is a trial to go through. It's not like, wow, it's only if it's good I'm gonna stay. If it's not good, well, I'm out of here. You're bound. Again, I'm not saying you're bound forever, right? Obviously, if there's a problem in the marriage and it can't be fixed, or you go for help and still it's not gonna be fixed, or whatever, fine. Then you get divorced. But then we're not talking about that, right? We're talking about someone had a stroke, someone was in a car accident, got brain damage. They don't recognize people. You don't just walk away. I mean, it's like that's what a coward would do, to say, well, when the going gets tough, I'm out of here. No matter if you've been married 30 years, 40 years, that's a horrific thing to do. So let's do the flip side, because that's what you wanted me to do. The flip side is, okay, I understand a woman, would be married, many women can be married to one man, right? For the laws of polygamy under different circumstances. Now, what's the issue with a woman? What's the issue with a woman? Let's say she wanted to have a lot of husbands. right? There's some, some women, I guess, like to play the field, etc. Right? But I think this, and again, I might get hammered for this, but that's okay. That's why we do this, and that is why, why would a woman be different? A man's going to marry many women, it could be for any number of reasons, right? In case of Rabbi Tarfon, how are these women going to live? They're not going to be able to live. So they stay married to him. He's able to support them, right? You have other situations where women are going to be, are going to be married. Many women are going to be married to one man. Now, again, it's not all about, it's not all about conjugal rights. Right? It's not all about sex. That's not what the issue, that's not what the issue is. There's a lot more that goes into it. It takes time, and what happens when a woman gets a period, you can't be together, right? For about 2 weeks. Okay, so I got another wife. I got a third wife. This is great. You're never lacking. Okay, but you're going to kill the husband in the process, right? So for a husband, it makes sense for a woman or a number of women to be married to one guy. Why? Because it's better for her to be married than not be married. She can be taken advantage of. It's not good for her to be alone, right? As the Talmud tells us, what about the opposite? What about a woman being married to many men, right? Now we haven't mentioned that. We didn't really, get into anything. We're keeping it PG here, or PG-13, right? Depending on the ratings. We're not saying a man is doing this all because, he's got this biological urge, which is a tremendous urge. Right? He's not marrying all these different women for that reason. King Solomon did not do that either. I mean, people may look at it that way, right? But he had a bigger vision, of what he was doing. It wasn't about that. And not only that, but we mentioned at the beginning, we cannot put our minds, our puny minds, into think, look what King Solomon did. What a womanizer. Yeah, at face value. When you don't know anything, you're a total ignoramus. That's the way it looks. Right? But when we look a little bit deeper at what's going on, you want to tell me the wisest of all men, right? Nothing to talk about. The wisest of all men could put Socrates in his pocket. Take 10 Socrates, 50 Socrates, 100 Socrates, put them in his pocket. You're going to tell me it's about, it's about that urge? I don't think so. We don't know who this person is. We can't imagine. We mentioned this at the beginning. Can't imagine who this person is. So there had to be something else. It wasn't just for that urge. So if a man's going to marry more than one woman, it could be, let's say his wife can't have children, right? Let's say she's barren, right? Or better, let's say he's married, his wife has kids, and he marries someone else that can't have kids, right? So that's an unbelievable act of loving kindness. Why is it an act of loving kindness? It's an act of loving kindness because he protects her, right? It's not about the urge. It's about, giving her livelihood. It's about, protecting her, protecting his house. As well. He's got, extra help, etc. Whatever it is, it's their benefit. You're not using her like a dish rag, no pun intended, not trying to be gross here, right? But it's not about that. Now that's from a guy's perspective, right? So you might think, I'm going to marry all these women. Yeah, he's going to die in the process, right? But it's not about that. There are other circumstances going on. What about the woman, right? So that's what you're going to say. What about the woman? Right. So what about the woman over here? Right. She wants to be married to, to a whole bunch of men. Now, I'll ask you, and we're not even really going to touch on this subject. Maybe speak about it next week. What about the laws of modesty? Right. What about the fact that, people have an issue, these feminists have an issue. I can't do this. You won't let me lead a prayer service. You won't let me sing in front of you. You won't let me, it has nothing to do with me. Right. It's what the Torah says, what the Talmud says. All these different things. Not about what I want, but women want to say we are equal. It's not a question of being equal. They're different. Right? Can women, are women exactly the same as men? They're not. So they're physically different. So spiritually, right? They're going to be different as well. But let me ask the $1 million question. How in the world, if a woman is modest, right? She's supposed to practice the laws of modesty. How can she go prancing from man to man? You're going to say, well, that's what the guy does. That's not what he's doing. Now, that's the way it looks. You're going to say, look, he's got his own harem, right? He's got all these women. Why does he have all these women, right? Look what he has to give all these women, right? He has to protect them. He has to give them a house, right? He has to give them clothing. He has to give them food, right? He also has to give them conjugal rights, right? A woman doesn't have all that. She's not obligated in all that. Just the opposite. The man's going to give to her, right? If the man's going to give to her, why is she going to all these different men? If she's going to all these different men, now I'm going to be a big-time sexist over here, and, you can hammer me for it. That's okay. And that is, why is she going to all these men? If you tell me she wants one man, and she'll be married to one man, and even if there are other women, it's to her benefit, protection, famine, wars. She's not going to be able to marry anyone else. All these people being killed, whatever the case is. That makes sense, right? It's not about the libido over here, right? It's about protection. It's about food, right? That may come with it, but that's not the main thing. If a woman goes prancing around looking for a man, it looks 10 times worse, right? Because he has to provide for her, not the other way around, right? So what's her benefit? What's she getting out of it, right? What she's getting out of it, what it seems like, and again, this is just me, right? But what it seems like is she's getting the pleasure, right? She can play the field. She's having a great time. That's the way she wants to use her body. Okay, right? It's not about protection. It's not about money, right? It's not about integrity over here. That's not what it's about. She's basically giving herself over. Now you're going to say, but these other women are also giving themselves over. Totally different thing, right? You're talking apples and oranges. Here they're doing it because they want protection. Here they're doing it because there's famine. Here they're doing it because they're not going to marry anyone else, right? They're not going to be able to get married, right? So they marry someone else, take care of his kids because they can't have kids. Whatever the case is, you're talking apples and oranges. Someone's going to say, okay, now what you've just said is 100% semantics, right? You're going to say if a man does it, he's not a gigolo. If a woman does it, that's the way it looks, right? That's what someone's going to say. Probably going to blast me in these comments, afterwards. Okay, right? But you have to, as we always say, you have to look at what it's in context, right? Not only that, there's a major difference between what a woman needs and what a man needs, right? A woman needs to be nourished. And, for a person to have a successful marriage, right? As I'll give a marriage counseling 101, and that is if you have a flower and you don't water it, it dies, right? You can give it all the sunlight you want. Stick it in the desert. Let's see what happens unless it's a cactus. It is 100%, right? 100%, it is going to die. So what? So therefore, we'll compare a woman to a plant, right? If you don't nurture it, you don't take care of it, it dies, right? In other words, that spark that's keeping you together will never keep you together. It's done, right? Especially if a person treats his wife, like a piece of flesh, no pun intended, right? That's why there's separation. That's why there are modesty laws. That's why there are family purity laws. Because therefore, if you can't be together all the time, which you're not supposed to be, that means the person has to treat his wife like a person. Cannot just, it's not all about physicality, right? If it's not all about physicality and a woman needs to be nurtured, then my question is, which again, I'll probably get hammered for, the question is, why is she going to all these different men, right? Why would she do that, right? What benefit? You're going to say, well, she gets nurtured and she's happy. Okay, maybe, right? Maybe we'll throw out that possibility. Maybe they nurture in such a way she needs certain things from this guy, certain things from that, from that person. So you say, well, it's an over-exaggeration. You're totally stereotyping. But again, we mentioned there's a major difference, right? There's a major difference that a woman certainly wants to be married, right? I don't think today, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that today's different. Even in desperate times, is she really going to want to be married to somebody who's got more than one wife, right? We have hard enough time with one wife, not to mention, multiple wives, right? So, you're talking about a different time, a different era, et cetera. And for the most part, as we mentioned, it wasn't, it really didn't work that well. The worst circumstances, maybe it had to be done, right? But if if I'm going to stereotype, I'll just go the whole way, right? So if you're going to look at it the other way, even if you're going to tell me a woman could get satisfied by different people in different ways, mentally or nurturing or whatever it is that I hear. That I could hear, to a certain extent, except for the fact there are laws of modesty. Women shouldn't, dress provocatively, causing other people to look. And if they look, it's, the guy gets the prohibition, but the woman also, if she dresses in a provocative way, it's called lifnei lo titen mikshel. It's called putting a stumbling block in front of somebody. And that you're not allowed to do. You say, well, it's the guy's fault. You're right. It's 100% the guy's fault for looking. Nothing to talk about. But if she dresses leaving everything hanging out, what do you want from the guy? What okay, he failed the test. Yeah, but she caused him. She caused him to do that. So, if she's doing certain things, again, we're not living in Victorian England. I don't think there's any question. You have to ask the question, why is she doing it? Right? In other words, if he's taking these wives for a number of different reasons, okay. Right? If she's taking different husbands, you have other issues. Right? The other issues that don't apply the other way. Right? You're gonna say, well, what about modesty? Are there modesty issues by these other women that are married? That are married to one man? No. Everyone's going to have their time and different things and however it's going to work out. But they're being married for a totally different reason. Right? And if a woman doesn't have that in their laws of modesty, just the opposite. She's not running around looking for different people to be with. She's not looking for different experiences, different things, protection, all that. If she wanted protection, be married to one person. Right? She's going to different people. That's a whole different thing, and certainly how it looks, and you got the laws of modesty and all that, and that's going to cause a lot of issues. So in that sense, I say I got another hour to go, so we're good. So in that sense,
you're funny.
When you have the Institute of Marriage, over here, just like anything in Torah, you cannot turn it into a pretzel. This is mine. I'm going to patent it. And if you patent it, I'm going to, if you use it, I'm going to sue you. And that is that, you cannot turn the Torah into a pretzel. When you turn the Torah into a pretzel and you say, I want to do this and I want to do that. And, keep in mind, when I was when I was learning by the conservative movement, in New York, a few years before, they made a decision to count women. To be women rabbis, count them as part of a quorum, as part of a service, and all that. And the end result was it passed, even though the Talmud department wouldn't have passed it, but they let everybody vote. So it ended up getting passed. But in the end, what ended up happening, it split the entire movement. There are people more traditional, less traditional. Today is a whole mix. It's a whole mix today. Right? But in the end, if God wanted women to be exactly like men, do the exact same things, he would have created them exactly the same, and it would have given them the same obligations. In other words, if a woman has to pray 3 times, right, 3 times a day, she has to be with a quorum of people and pray. Oh, I got little kids. I don't care, you got little kids. Get a carpool. Work it out. Right? It's not my problem. You got an obligation. Obviously, there are reasons why they are exempt. It's not about, I want to do this. And it's not about what I want to do, right? We cannot, this thing comes full circle because I said it about 100 times. And that is you cannot put your 21st century idea in Torah. That doesn't go. We got to see what the issue is. We got to dig around the issue, see what it means, what it represents, and then analyze it. But we cannot, you have to look at it as a holy book. If it's a holy book, I can't carve it up. I can't carve it up like a scrapbook, God forbid, or something like that, because that's exactly what it becomes. Then you open up a Pandora's box, and then it's game over. And even if I would say that, okay, we want to be more inclusive and we'll let women do this, we'll let women do that, all kinds of things. Even if I was so generous, which I'm not, but even if I be so generous, I would say, okay, let's get more people involved. Let's go out there and save Judaism. Bring up my pom-poms and start dancing and singing. Let's go. It doesn't work. So even if we would do all these different things, be all inclusive, right? Let women, we'll count gays, we'll do all these things, no problem. We'll go through all these different things. It's going to be so inclusive. We're gonna fill up the synagogues. week in and week out. Doesn't work, right? That's not the reason. The reason is because people say, I want to do what I want to do. And that is not what the Torah says. And the Torah says, if you're allowed to do it, good. This is what you have to do. If you're not allowed to do it, you're not allowed to do it. But there's going to be payback. There's reward and punishment. You're not allowed to pick and choose. You're not allowed to say, I want to do this and I want to do that. What happened to laws of modesty for women? They all of a sudden, they want to be in the front lines. They want to be, they want to be everywhere. They want to do everything in public. Well, what happened to modesty, right? So, maybe we'll have to, maybe we'll have to cover that in another show because I know you're about to boot me out. So
I was going to give you an 8-second countdown earlier, but I figured
8 seconds. Wait a minute. Someone, I'll tell a quick story. I was in San Jose, California.
And you were bull riding.
Speaking on a Shabbaton.
Okay.
And I got up at the third meal on Shabbos to speak. They said, I got introduced. They said, okay, Rabbi, you have 10 minutes. I'm like, 10 minutes? I can't speak in less than 15. They're like, you have 10 minutes. Some said, no, don't worry about it. We'll give you more. I was like, thank God. Does it give you at least 10 minutes? You're giving me 35 seconds. You're going to say, okay, Rabbi, can you sum it up in 5 seconds?
I know, right? I'm so horrible. That's all right.
No.
Hey, you're doing good. You go and wrap it up whenever you're ready.
I'm done. That's it. I stopped.
Okay,
I know
good.
You're going to stop. So I guess we can, we continue with this with modesty, other type of, issues next week, unless something else comes up.
Okay.
But it's, again, just, you give me 30 seconds again. The idea is it's not about what I want to do. This is what people have to understand. It's a hard thing. Yeah, the rabbi said this, the rabbi said that, but this is the only thing we have, right? And God said you have to listen to the rabbis of every generation. So it's not about what I want to do, right? It's about what's right. It's about what the Torah says. That's what we have to remember. And no matter what happens in the world, right? You have to see that what happens in the world, for better or for worse, God's saying this is it. This is what I want, right? For whatever reason, we may cause it, could be because of our sins. There are a lot of things in the world make absolutely no sense, right? Make absolutely zero sense. Okay, so you're gonna say what's going on? I don't know. Stay tuned. Right, we're gonna have to see how all kinds of things play out and what's gonna be, and nobody knows, but I think we're gonna be pleasantly surprised or not pleasantly surprised the way things go because we don't have a clue. We have no clue what we're looking at. We have to remember God's the one in charge. I have to believe God's everything is gonna be for the best. Whatever's gonna be, I still have to wake up in the morning and I still have to pray and I still have to learn Torah, and it's not about what I want to do. Right? It's about what God tells me I have to do and what our obligations are, whether Jew or non-Jew. Okay, 27 seconds. That wasn't bad.
You did good. All right. Well, Rebbe,
I wasn't counting, but I had it in my head. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. Oh, was there fraud in Mississippi? Never mind. We're not going there.
Don't get me to trying that. Multitasking, counting while I talk at the same time. It's quite difficult. So, all right. Well, Rabbi, thank you so much. It was a lot of fun. Great topic. We'll see what kind of hate mail we get. Hopefully not much. Hopefully it'll all go over well. And we'll look forward to seeing you and everybody else same time, same place next week, Hashem willing. So, Rabbi, thanks again. And thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to hit the like button, please. It helps circulate these videos more. So, appreciate it, guys. See you next time.
חשוב מכל חשוב